Welcome back to Let's Talk Race and Ireland. I'm your host, Harrison Paul. Today we mourn the Olympic runner who was set on fire by her boyfriend, Rebecca Cheptegei. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. I'll try it again. Rebecca Cheptegei. And it's a very difficult time, obviously, for her family and everyone around her. And probably is a very difficult time for um, you know, um, women in general. I feel like women sometimes, not even sometimes, they will see a situation like this and kind of see themselves in this type of a situation and ask themselves the main question: are they safe in a relationship? Now, one of the arguments I found myself having with a few black women in my past, not anybody I was dating, but just people I have held the debate with, was how safe is a black relationship for a black woman. We talk a lot about in the community about black love and keeping the wealth in the family, keeping it all in the bloodline and whatnot. But one of the main discussions and arguments that have been brought to me in the past was, well, it's not even safe for us. Statistically, it is not even safe for us. And while I am having to empathize and I guess accept that argument as a strong argument today at the death of Rebecca. I'm also wanting this message today to be a slight pushback to anybody who might be feeling that. And of course, during these times, you see comments that say, black man, here we go again. And we know on Twitter we have a long war that's been going on between black men and black women about how terrible each one is, and it's just been back and forth, and it's been in the public eye and for everyone to see it. But I just wanted to, probe here a little bit, in the way that we're perceiving this or any situation. But I really want to lay the foundation for this episode to say it is with a heavy heart that we see Rebecca lose her life because of this. And of course, at first, glance, my mind and my heart is disappointed and with this story. Now we don't know the race of the boyfriend, but I'm because he's in Kenya. I'm consuming or Rwanda. She was from Kenya. I think she's Kenyan, Ugandan. Sorry, and by the sounds of it, she was living in Africa. So my automatic assumption is that she was with a black man. But there is a heartbreak for me even looking at this and kind of understanding that, here it goes, another moment in which we, it's a dent in the image of black love or, the safety of black women. But now that I have actually laid that foundation of my, to be careful, that I don't sound like I'm just nullifying this event that's taken place, I wanted to move on and say, same topic, but just move on and say, let's be careful, guys, that we are not painting all of us with the same brush. Now, I understand that a lot of people would argue that stats show, and they would argue that this is not just one story, and a lot of us probably have someone dear to us or that we love who have experienced a form of domestic violence or violence, and I understand that. But I also want to say that as a race, and I said this in my last episode I put on the screen, we find ourselves so quick to brand ourselves. And even when I say the word branding there, I'm thinking of a cow and how they burn it with that, logo, whatever it would be. So quickly to just like we're cattle, brand us all under this, one behavior or, every black person is just by DNA or I don't know, it is more susceptible to crime, or more susceptible to domestic violence, or more susceptible to any sort of violence. And I wanted to actually say that it is only because of the way we have been treated by white society that we do that. We have that habit of saying, you see, this is what we do. You see, this is what we are. You see, this is what we are. Because white society was always waiting for a moment to justify their emotions towards us, to whether it was to criminalize us, whether it was to undermine us, whether it was to block us from opportunity, whether it was to even just to kind of clean for them to feel good about their hatred. It was always this on their toes, waiting to say, "I told you so." This is why the black man is good for nothing. And now we have got in that habit of doing that to ourselves, of aha moments, and we jump on them. And why I say that and why it's obvious is because, just today as I was digesting this, I'm thinking about this, and my mind is, really in a whirlwind about this. I'm thinking on whether or not do I listen. I'm probably even hopping into the same habits myself of this is what we do, or this is what we do. And it wasn't long until a story was brought to my attention again. This story has been going crazy at the moment. It's a French story, and it says, "My father let 72 men rape my mother. When I found out, I was his second prey." And Caroline Derian, the Telegraph, posted about this story. And here we have a story where it's awful. I think it's in France, could have been, where a woman was raped, as you can see here. And every time she would be knocked to sleep by her husband, and when she was knocked to sleep, she would be then men would be brought in. He was also recording her and putting on the internet, basically selling his wife. And here's a daughter here now sharing her story. And another story that came up on my, just even tonight, just literally before I got on this show, is the Wade Wilson story. Now, I've seen this story before, but it is the guy who killed his. And now take a look at this, guys. Because he was attractive, I guess, white women, I suggest, were actually on his line calling him, and he had like some sort of a fan base of women who were sending love letters and sending whatever. And if this were black women, and if this was a black man specifically, I can see all types of shade rooms, shade burrows, all of them just saying, all the TikTok experts saying, this is why black men do this, because black women, and this is, and I can just see the uproar in this conversation. But Wade Wilson is able to be Wade Wilson, and those girls who are calling him are able to be those girls who are calling him, without it becoming about every single white man and white woman on the planet. And because the history is not there, the racial history of like I said, with the cow, branding them all, that's the cattle, just like this is really powerful. One time, my mother explained this to me, of like why the black man is always, kind of like grouped into like a group. If you think about a monkey, right, or an animal in particular, let's say a monkey, to be a little bit specific to the racial undertones we received. You don't look at a monkey like an individual, a person, right? It's like, if a monkey did something to you, monkeys do this. You're not going to say, like, you won't actually say, oh no, this monkey was different. In fact, especially in the West, dogs even get slight more individuality of like, oh no, this dog bit, but the other one doesn't bite. That they probably even get more of a benefit of doubt. But in terms of animals, let's say a monkey, you don't look at it like an individual, right? And because Africans have come back from trying to really regain our respect from being branded as animals or just kind of cattle. At one point, we were actually counted along with the cattle. There's some history for you as well. This is why you always see history today. That mentality was passed through, right? That's why if someone has one certain behavior, they'll tell you, person feel like they can do certain behaviors and tick off what it means to be, black. And I've never seen that. Look, that can be complimentary. We can think about it in terms of like Irishness, right? You can have a pint and something, and you're seen as Irish. But it's always been kind of like a downgrading of like, oh yeah, it's very simple to wrap black people up into this thing, rather than a cultural richness of like, this is what black people do. Rather, it's like, oh, if I just talk like this and move like that and do this and that, then it's that. So it's like an undergrading of like how you say mimic an animal, of like, oh yeah, an animal has a few movements and that's all that's to them. And that's why you can find movements like the asylum seeker movement, where it's like, we're not safe, we're not this, because it's this continuous branding that we are under. And that's what allows, so you saying that, oh, we're long over history where we said that you were 3/5 of a human being. Really? Is that why in 2024 there are still protests and riots happening, and not even the rioters themselves, but people who are the polite rioters, people who started this rubbish, who put petrol on the fire? They have been like talking about black people in this grouped manner of like a species. They're not too far from each other. This is the way, this is the format in which a black person comes, very simplified. So besides all these, stories in which happens with white people, and they're in it, and like we said, the French lady who was raped by her husband, and we got Todd, or whatever his name is, Wade Wilson. It's such a shame, right? Because that doesn't become his whole brand. That doesn't become the whole brand, of the whole entire race. So I'm just asking my brothers and sisters, as you watch this and as you ask the question, I'm going to leave this topic to this video kind of very controversial. And I'm going to say, is black relationships safe for black people? What kind of conversations are these that we have of like, is black love safe for us, or is this and that? We're not counting the wrongs of white people, and that habit that you are in to just write us off as, oh yeah, we're all the same. Oh yeah, it's you've developed that from your master. That quick, way to just penalize us. You developed it from your master. But to sign off, and I won't spend too much time, I do want to discuss, besides the fact that I do think, like I said there, we are judged with this very critical eye, extra hot spotlight, where it's like, aha, look, this is what we do. This is by black people. And we have to put that into context, right? But besides that, I do want to have a small little touch. I don't have much time, but just slightly touch on, I do feel to some degree there has been trauma developed within the black community, because I believe there have been African morals in which we were, rich cultural structure that we had. And I feel like, or not even feel, I'm so sure that colonization caused so much damage to the African family unit. But because we are not a people who are desperately, like the African Americans, on this war of trying to get to the bottom of, and the bottom of what is the crimes that against humanity, the crimes that happen against them, and we bought into, this false sense of forgiveness. With, I don't know, because I believe Africans massively still suffer from a colonized mind. We're never actually getting to the root and understanding a lot of the things that damage the damages that sit within our community. So our, get beat down and get on with it mentality, really slave, colonized, oppressed mentality has become a brand for how we operate. And that is why I feel a lot of times as I'm doing my research and as my mother, she's an author of a book I'll put on the screen for you guys to see it. There's so much trauma there that it just seems like it has not been explored to understand why haven't we all taken a minute to understand that such and such behaviors are a clear indication of the brokenness that happened to our families under colonization, and that there is a lot of hurt. I was having a discussion with a brother actually, and he was kind of telling me this thing about I just sometimes I don't I felt like my parents, I knew they loved me but just wouldn't really express it, and I get that story a lot with black youth of like that kind of hardenedness, and I'm now realizing that hardenedness, that inability sometimes to be vulnerable, especially from the black man, does that come from a survival? Does that come from the hardness of, because it seems to be this pattern? And I remember a lot of times, my black friends would kind of, we in the laughing manner, we'd romanticize, oh, you see how, and that easygoing that white dad can be with his daughter, or show love or whatever, and we'd look at that like, picket fenced in a small way. Not to say there's no white people with trauma, but there were kind of lighter tones that we felt, excuse the pun, over on that side in comparison to a lot of the tough love that a lot of black youth grew up having from a father or from a mother, or a sense of toughness. And for me personally, I think with my research, I'm coming to understand this has got to do a lot with the trauma, the hardened shell that's been developed within the black community. I for one, feel that could be one of our biggest answers. But because we don't do enough of this kind of exploring about the legacy and of colonialism and the trauma that are left on us as a people, and I do a lot of that on this page, but because we don't do that enough as a community, we are not understanding where certain cultural things that were beautiful at one point became disjointed. And I think, specifically when we talk about the relationship between the black man and the black woman, I think there was so much beauty in that relationship, so much wholesomeness in that relationship. Like, one of the things I was even discussing with my mother today of like, her father, so she was, not to give away her age, but she's obviously above 50. And then you can imagine what age her father was. Her father died at 60, but he had her quite old. So, they were of a different generation than that. And he used to call, my grandmother, mom, meaning the honor that he had for her was like his own mother. The honor that he had for her was like his own mother. And this was African culture. So we, a lot of the times, focus and hone in on this submission. And we have this, say Candace owns this Blexit. A lot of black European kids are like, I'm breaking free from African culture, but I'll take the wedding because it looks cool, and I'll take the cool things, but I'm breaking free and I'm going to merge it with my new westernized idea of, female freedom and all those kind of things. And I get where the fear comes out of for feeling oppressed, but might I say, I actually think that there's a lot of big conversation here which we are not having, and it is the generation of a lot of our parents, me being 28 years old, and anybody around that time, your parents would be in their 50s or 60s. I think it's actually a conversation to have that a lot of that generation are literally the babies of colonialism. A lot of them straddled on either side of freedom and captivity. Not personal captivity, because we know how colonization operated. It operated differently to slavery, but a lot of them were under that if we think now in Western world we can feel a heavy air when we go into work, when we go certain places, think about what it felt like where literally, anybody who's Zimbabwean and who is my age, your mother or father, literally were times where they couldn't walk certain routes because that's where white people walked. So if you think about certain parents and African parents and just different stuff raising that, how they internalize that, we never sit and ask how that seeped into the psyche of the Zimbabwean people, then Rhodesian. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? So a lot of the things that we're seeing is like, oh, that's African culture. I beg to differ. I don't think a lot of that generation, like I said, the generation are doing it right. I think there's a generation before that who did a lot of things right, and a generation before that, I think there are African cultures that were really good. And then we get this new culture where, I can understand and I can empathize with women. Like, it's like this women just get the short end of the stick. And I understand why black women most times are like, I'm coming to Europe and I'm never looking back. I've seen my mama go through it. A lot of us late 20s or early 30s, I've seen my mama go through it. Hell no, I'm not looking back. And it's like, but was that really African culture, or was that a perverse African culture? Was that really African culture? All you ever seen was your mom getting cheated on and messed about. Was that really African? The African culture I know, my grandfather, who were honorable men, lived and died to provide for their family, lived and died for their children. They weren't gallivanting on the streets. Their lives meant. So when a woman was honoring her husband, there were relationships as well. Not that I think, again, I'm a Christian. Biblically, this is not what I went with. But there were, polygamous relationships. There were people who were married. So even the concept that we have today of dating, that's a new westernized thing that we've mixed in. There was no dating. If you saw a woman, you decided, I want to marry this woman. You did not bed this woman without deciding, I have to go and meet the parents, sit the parents down, and have a conversation and actually fight for this woman to be a part of my home. So now when you mix that with this warped Western culture where you can date and you can do things and what all that kind of stuff, that's kind of more casual. No. And when you were leaving a woman, you had to sit down. That's the thing I love about African culture. You can't just decide I'm leaving a woman. You have to gather all those people you gathered in order to have the diary. You have to regather those people and then give them a good explanation as to why you and this marriage of this woman cannot work. So it wasn't a pick up and drop whenever you felt like it. There was a diary price you paid to begin with. There was a ceremony. There was a fight, more like it. You fought for this woman's hand in marriage. And if you were polygamous, if that's what you like, that's what you believed, you damn near took care of your family. There was it wasn't a pleasure deal. It was a new responsibility. Now, my grandfather was a Christian. He believed in the one man, one woman, one man concept. But there's so much aspects when I hear the African culture that I'm hearing about, and that's why a lot of people, we're torn, because some people are like, I want to hang on to African culture, or I want to let go of it, because a lot of our parents are saying, wait, hold on. Although you didn't see it mirrored in my life, when I look at my grandfathers or my grandparents, and this is our parents talking, there was so much beauty in that. And I know what got lost. What got lost is so much trauma and disjointedness in this kind of last generation. I feel there was so much trauma and disjointedness. I will explore further into this in another video, definitely will. But we're accrediting a lot of this disjointedness to the actual belief itself, rather than people who are just lost. What's one of the lines, and I'll end on this, one of the lines that my mother said in her book was like Zimbabwe was trying to salvage its culture, or at least what was left of it. We have to understand that we're picking up pieces. We're picking up pieces. But one thing I know about us as African people, we're so honorable. So when you see even the aspects of respect, dignity, respect elders, seems now we want to throw everything out the window. I understand that there's a lot of warpedness that's coming in, but please understand it's the condition of a broken people. I don't doubt that any second. The same way I do not look at African American culture and the negatives, the huge negatives, and say, oh, look at it. It's a part of African American culture to be hooked on guns and rap music. And no, the self-hatred is coming with the guns and the killing each other and all those kind of things. The crack in the hoods and the cocaine, that comes from the fact that the ghettos, is there anything to even say about the ghettos? That's the most broken place. That's where you see black trauma live. Yes, not everyone's family came out and went to Harvard, went to college. Some people fell under that pressure, and that's where you have the American ghettos. You understand? So that's all I'm going to have to say today. Please do not look at the death of Rebecca, the Olympian runner, as yet again, here we go. Get yourself out of that habit. Get yourself out of the habit of just, oh, black men, black women. Oh, this is how we go. Because we can look over the other side and there's some really nasty stuff going on over there. And it doesn't get accredited to the entire race. And on top of that, let's start to investigate about the beauty in African culture, the beauty in African union, and begin to pick up the pieces and also investigate the trauma in us as a whole and how that is manifesting itself within relationships. We already know that there's self-hatred. We already know in companies black people can't even get on. Do you understand what I'm saying? So even the cultural sides that you feel have been allowed to go for years and generations, I would second guess some of the stuff that you're seeing today, and I would not accredit them to the real African rural areas who had done things so beautifully and lived and died about honor. Life was about honor, you know, and laying one's life down for their family. So thank you so much for watching. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. And I'm on a mission for you.